Hey everyone, welcome back to Data and Donuts. My name's Aaron. I'm here today with my friend and colleague, Rene Gutierrez. We're here today to talk a little bit about applied predictive analytics and how it's been used in student services. But before we get to that, I will have Rene share a little bit about himself.
Hi, everybody. Everybody out there. My name is Rene Gutierrez, as Aaron has mentioned. I am the Director of Student Leadership and Global Engagement at Coastline College. And previous to that, I was the NPC Grant Director here at Coastline College. And my background is actually from UCLA. I have a degree in economics, and then I have my master's in counseling from Cal State Long Beach.
Thanks so much, Rene, for sharing a little bit about yourself. And so we're going to jump right into the interview today and talk about predictive analytics. How have you used predictive analytics in student support services?
So I love using predictive analytics, particularly in terms of using services or addressing and using services. But I use it primarily for two specific things. One was improving equity efforts to investigate and understand student needs and behaviors. And the other one was that once we understood those behaviors, to then figure out our best places and strategies to deploy those high impact practices.
Excellent, excellent. So we're going to dig a little bit deeper, and would you like to share some success stories on how you use not just a characteristic analytics, but behavioral analytics in your services and work?
Sure, those are really good questions. So our focus when I was working on the NPC grant, as you know, it's the Asian American, Native American, Pacific Islander Serving Institution grant. Our job was to try to increase Asian American Pacific Islander persistence rates, specifically fall to fall persistence rates. And at Coastline at the time, it was about 52%. And so we were trying to really boost that up. And so when we started using predictive analytics, we started looking at what are the top 10 issues in terms of persistence. And what that allowed us to do is that when we found those specific data points, what we did is we showed it to our staff and some of our faculty in terms of what those behaviors are looking like. But the cool thing about predictive analytics is that it doesn't necessarily give you an answer. I think there's an assumption about predictive analytics being like a computer answer, and that's not it at all. It gives you an indication that something is happening, but no one knows why. And so I left it to my team and students to figure out and investigate why this is happening. And then once we figured out some of those issues, we then thought about how effective are our practices in actually addressing those needs. So I'll give you an example. One of the things that we noticed with our student population is that there was a high spike in students who weren't persisting in a specific time range of students who were receiving financial assistance between 2,500 and 3,200. Now that's a very specific spot. And when we started looking at other pieces in terms of other behaviors, we couldn't figure out why was that a data point? Why were students struggling in that spot? And as we started investigating it and really asking my staff and students and looking at our evaluations, we really started thinking about, oh, those students have money, but it's not enough money to really figure out what they needed to do, right? So they were still struggling with finances. They were still struggling with activities or how to stay on campus. And so we worked with our mentors and our students to think about, well, what are some workshops that we need to do as a result of that behavior? What are some trainings that my staff needed to go through? And who are some of the contacts at the college who needed to be involved in this conversation? And so it allowed us to figure out the nudges and our service curriculum and our targets. And that is not something I don't think you can find necessarily out of, just looking at general data. But when you look at behavioral predictive analytics, I think you can see those things. And I think the main piece about predictive analytics that I don't think people really acknowledge, understand, is that our college and every other college out there collects so much information. In fact, I think our ability to collect information has exceeded our ability to make sense of it. And so by using predictive analytics, it gives you that time to really figure that out, but it gives it to you in real time. So you don't have to wait till the end of the semester. So it feels more like an autopsy versus actually monitoring what's going on with students, and it's not too late.
Excellent, excellent. I completely agree. I think data autopsy is one of the biggest challenges that we face. We try to make decisions off of what had already happened. And with something like what you've been using, you're doing it in real time. So you're able to react and engage with the students. It sounds like that's been very positive. And just to reiterate to Renee, we are having tons, or reiterate what Renee was saying, we have tons. I just talked to our district director the other day. We have 1,200 automated reports you can run at any point in time. 1,200. I was like, I thought it was like 100, but 1,200. So that just kind of goes right back to Renee. We're really drowning in data. We're just thirsty for like a cup of it. That's all we need. And so that's really interesting to think about, especially our own institutions across everyone viewing this. And then, so when thinking about predictive analytics, Renee, what recommendations would you have, or things individuals may want to consider when utilizing predictive analytics?
So there's probably a couple things, but I think the main overarching thing is developing what we call like a community of practice around predictive analytics. It's great for one person or potentially a staff to use it, but it's even more important to have a whole community of practitioners who are looking at it from their angle and their services, so that you can really have the biggest impact using predictive analytics. And so when you develop a community of practice, and that being individuals from student support services or from instruction or from faculty, you get a conversation about what those needs are. And what you're allowing the whole group to do is also investing in each other's goals and each other's outcomes, and really addressing what those students need the most. So I think the overarching thing was about your community of practice. And so a part of that community of practice, there are some main things you want to think about, which is one, who's using it and for what purposes? Even within data or predictive analytics, I think you still need to get comfortable looking at data consistently. And I think a lot of our practices to this day are still using anecdotal behaviors or anecdotal stories to judge what we're doing. And you kind of have to get out of that habit. So that's probably one of the main pieces. Also, in terms of using it for specific purposes, you also have to be careful about using predictive analytics, because it could also be used to reinforce existing stereotypes and trends. So example being, if you know that these are the specific students that are in need or have trouble, some people might even look at and go, well, that's the group we need to stay away from, because they're not necessarily, we shouldn't necessarily put as much money into that, because we can focus on students who are going to succeed more likely, right? And in terms of equity efforts, that's the exact opposite you want to happen. But it's not too far-fetched to really think about that. I think the second part is understanding that it's not computerized decision-making. So it's also that you have to think about how you incorporate predictive analytics into your flow, your workflow process, right? So is this happening during meetings or in the middle of semester? Where is this data going to be looked at? And I think the last thing is, and this is probably something that I haven't really looked at, but it's something to consider, I think, for most colleges, is thinking about privacy questions. You know, there's so much student data that we're using. I don't know if this necessarily is covered by FERPA anymore, right? Because of how much data there is out there that this doesn't necessarily figure out or covered in those privacy issues. So I think that's something that colleges are going to have to think about for the future.
Most definitely. I think really wrapping those up, there's some big ideas you brought in with the community of practice, how you're utilizing that data, not just depending on the data as the output to make the decision, but as an informant to facilitate that dialogue. And then also understanding that privacy. I think you give a really full picture of things to consider for the future. And so for my last two questions, my first question, two bonus questions. So the question is, I hear data, the terminology data said all the time, data, all kinds of ways. So there's no wrong way to say it. And if anyone ever says it in front of you, obviously, I always recommend just repeat back what they're saying so they don't feel silly. So what do you say?
I usually say data.
Okay.
I don't remember the last time I actually used the word data. I still think that doesn't roll off my tongue, so I'd say data.
No worries, me too. And so the next question is, what's your favorite donut?
I'm going to say specifically a blueberry cake donut from Dunkin' Donuts.
The blueberry ones are the best. When I tried one, I don't know, it was a couple of years back. I was like, what is this? It's like a muffin and a donut at the same time or something.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, awesome. Well, this has been really fun, Renee, and I really appreciate you sharing a little bit of your experience and background with us today. And everyone, thank you for watching today. Please hit the subscribe button, and thank you again, Renee. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, everybody.